Okay, Mr. Mayor, we are now live. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I would like to call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. I'll ask for approval of the agenda. Is there any add-ons to agenda here tonight? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you have some items. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things at the request of staff. We would like to add a closed session discussion to this evening's agenda regarding one topic regarding litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and a second item regarding personal matters regarding an identifiable individual. Further, we would like to request that the agenda be amended, specifically the order of business, to include closed session discussions as agenda item 7 rather than agenda item 19.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So noted. Please remind me if I do not get it in order. Okay, I have a recommendation here that the agenda be approved as amended, including the additions to closed session, and that the order of business be amended to host closed session discussions as agenda item 7 prior to presentations. Someone to move, put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councilor Colburn, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Kathy Moore Coburn.
4.
Councillor Ryan Thompson.
Enough peculiar interest, you can clear anytime you see fit during the meeting. Okay, moving on our agenda, minutes of the previous minutes. I have a recommendation that the minutes of the council meeting held on February 10th, 2021 be adopted. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councilor Sutherland, second by Councilor Pringle. Any discussion on those minutes? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Okay, when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Kathy Moore Coburn.
4.
Councillor Ryan Thompson is absent. Councillor Carol Barfoot is absent. Councillor Paul Sutherland.
4.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
4.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
4.
And Mayor Dwight Burley.
4.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. We have no announcements tonight, I see. Moving off our agenda, we're down to public hearings. I have a recommendation here that the regular council meeting be recessed to hold public meetings for the consideration of the zoning bylaw amendment applications Z0121 for Anna Seabold for property located at 1900 8th Avenue West, and Z0321 application Cliff Mill owners of Sharon Morrison, executor for property described as concession 2 part lot 4RP 16R61928 part of part 1. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Colburn, second by Councillor Sutherland. Yes, there's no discussion on the motion before us. Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Okay, when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Kathy Moore Coburn.
4.
Councillor Ryan Thompson is absent. Councillor Carol Barfoot is absent. Councillor Paul Sutherland.
4.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
4.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
4.
And Mayor Dwight Burley.
4.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. I would like to call this public meeting to order. This meeting has been called for the purpose of considering an application for a zoning bylaw amendment application Z0221 for Anna Chaibo. I apologize for not saying the name properly. For property located at 1900 8th West. Would the clerk please advise those present as to the method by which the notice of this motion was given? Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Notice of this public meeting was given by ordinary mail to all property owners within 120 meters, 400 feet of the subject property, by email to all of the prescribed bodies on January 22nd, 2021, posted at the subject property and posted on the Township of Georgian Bluffs website. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of Georgian Bluffs before the proposed zoning bylaw is adopted or passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Township of Georgian Bluffs to the local planning appeal tribunal, and the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party. Mr. Mayor, you are muted.
Sorry, I gotta move my papers. Would the planner please explain the purpose and effect of the proposed application, whether any correspondence has been received to date? Jen?
Yes, thank you and good evening. So the purpose of this zoning bylaw amendment and the deeming application is to create one larger parcel. So it's roughly about 3,000 square meters, which is about 3/4 of an acre. And by merging those three small lots, we'll meet the lot area and frontage requirements of the zoning bylaw. So Anna Zabo is the applicant and she owns a property in Brook. It has an existing home on it. What she would like to do is to build an addition onto the existing home and to install a new septic system to accommodate that new part of the house. So in order to do this in compliance with zoning bylaw, the setback from the environmental protection zone needs to be reduced from 15 meters to 5. And the deemed parcel needs to be recognized as an existing lot of record. So we've seen similar applications in the town plot of Brook recently, requesting the same sort of relief in order to be able to develop the lot. So I have provided a policy review in the planning report for the committee's consideration of this application. And I'd be happy to answer any specific questions that members may have on the reviewed policies. So as the committee is aware through reading the report and approving applications in Georgian Bluffs, the Grace Harbor Conservation Authority reviews planning applications within Georgian Bluffs and provides comments based on their responsibilities as a regulatory authority under Ontario Regulation 15106, and also as a service provider to the township through a memorandum of understanding. So they identified natural hazard on the property, identified with the flood and erosion potential of the watercourse, and that watercourse runs through the center of the property. A site visit was undertaken by planning staff with the GA Grace Harbor Conservation Authority. So I attended the site prior to the application being submitted just to have observed the location of the proposed development and have a look at the watercourse and the hazards associated with that. So Grace Harbor did attend, and they have no objection to reducing the EP zone to accommodate the proposal. The development will be outside of the hazard area, but it will be within the setback to that hazard. So they have no objection to reducing that setback. So you'll also read in the report that the proposed addition is within adjacent lands to the significant woodland feature. However, because it's proposed within the manicured footprint associated with that existing house, no impacts are anticipated with the building addition. So the area, those adjacent lands, they've already been disturbed or altered. So there's not going to be any additional impact with that building addition. So the Conservation Authority comments also identify that there will be an increase to site imperviousness through this building addition, and so I did have some email correspondence with MAC at the Conservation Authority, and they are going to require some more detail in the stormwater management plan for the development of this lot. That's something that can be submitted at the permit application stage. So because the entire property is regulated by Grace Hobble, the property owner requires a development permit from them in addition to the building permit. So the engineered stormwater management plan with more details that will be provided will also satisfy the Georgian Bluffs Building Department's requirements for a stormwater management plan in the Brook area. So, and also through the review, the Conservation Authority have looked at the setback to the watercourse, because originally the applicant had applied for a setback, a reduction in the setback to the watercourse. So in their review of the application, they find that the actual setback to the watercourse is 20 meters. So there's no need for the township to approve a setback. The required setback is 15 meters, but they're going to be at 20 meters. So there's no need to have a reduction to the setback. So in terms of the zoning for the property, what we see with this application is that the existing house doesn't meet the front and side yard setbacks of the zoning bylaw. So most zoning bylaws do contain a provision to recognize that existing structures may not conform to the current bylaw as they were constructed under different provisions. And that's the case for this property. So in the bylaw, we have a provision that permits the building addition, provided it doesn't further increase the situation of non-compliance with the provisions of the current bylaw. So the proposed addition will not extend any closer to the lot line than the current dwelling. So there's not going to be a further contravention of the bylaw. So the addition as proposed meets the requirements of the bylaw. If the applicant didn't have to have any other planning relief, then we would be able to issue her a building permit based on that section of the zoning bylaw. So deeming bylaws, as we've seen with a number of properties in Brook, the actual land holding is made up of a number of smaller lots. So in order to comply with setback provisions of the zoning bylaw, what needs to happen is that those interior lot lines, they need to be dissolved, and or it's what we say the properties need to be merged into a larger parcel. So that's done through a deeming process. It requires the bylaw to be registered on title to the lands, and a copy of that registration needs to come back to the township with the building permit application, so that to verify that the lot line's been dissolved and the setbacks can be met. In terms of the comments we've received, we did circulate this application to various agencies for review. The Grace Hobble Conservation Authority has no objections to the approval of the subject zoning bylaw amendment and reducing the setback from the EP zone from 15 meters to 5 meters. They note the setback from the watercourse for the proposed development appears to be 20 meters. As such, reducing the setback is not necessary. Grey County Planning and Development Department note that provided positive comments are received from the Grace Hobble Conservation Authority regarding the hazard lands and significant woodlands, county planning staff have no further concerns with the subject application. They request notice of any decision rendered with respect to the application. And the Historic Saugeen Métis have no objection or opposition to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment as presented. The Grace Hobble Conservation Authority Risk Management Office, they note no policies apply to the activities identified in this application. However, it's important to note that the above property is located within the events-based area for the R.H. Neath Water Treatment Plant in On Sound, whereby the storage of fuel greater than 50,000 liters is regulated. We did circulate the application to all property owners within 120 meters, and we didn't receive any written comments from the neighbors. So just in conclusion, it's been demonstrated that the proposed application is consistent with the applicable policies, provincial policy statement, county official plan, Township of Georgian Bluffs official plan, and the bylaw. And provided there are no issues raised at the meeting this evening, the recommendation is to approve the zoning bylaw amendment and deeming applications. And I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Jen. No members of the public. Does council have any questions regarding the proposed applicant? Seeing none, council will consider all matters placed before it prior to submitting their comments to the applicant. May I call for an adjournment of this public meeting? Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councillor Pringle. Just a show of hands of who's in favor. All in favor? It's carried. So I have a recommendation here. It has been demonstrated that the proposed applicant is consistent with the provincial policy statement 2020, the county official plan, the Township of Georgian Bluffs official plan, and the Township of Georgian Bluffs zoning bylaw 2020. It is recommended that report PL 2021-09 for Z0121 for Anna Zebo be approved for information and provide no issues are raised at the public meeting that zoning bylaw amendment application Z0121 and the corresponding deeming application for Anna Zebo for lands described as TP Town Prada Brook lots 136, 138, 140, Alberts WS be approved. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Colburn, second by Councillor Sutherland. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Kathy Marshall.
For.
Councillor Ryan Thompson is absent. Councillor Carol Barfoot is absent. Councillor Paul Sutherland.
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
For.
And Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you, Brittany. We'll move on for our next public meeting. I would like to call this public meeting to order. This meeting has been called for the purpose of considering an application for proposed zoning bylaw amendment application Z0321 for Cliff McMillan Estate of Sharon H. Morris, and for property described as concession to part lot 4 RP 16R1928 part of Part 1. Would the clerk please advise those present as to the method by which the notice of this meeting was given? Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Notice of this public meeting was given by ordinary mail to all property owners within 120 meters, 400 feet of the subject property, by email to all of the prescribed bodies on January 22nd, 2021, posted at the subject property and posted on the Township of Georgian Bluffs website. If a person or a public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of Georgian Bluffs before the proposed zoning bylaw is adopted or passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Township of Georgian Bluffs to the local planning appeal tribunal, and the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Would the planner please explain the purpose and effect of the proposed applicant and whether any correspondence has been received to date? Jen? You're muted, Jen.
Thank you. The purpose of this application is to rezone the portion of the lands from open space 1 to a rural zone, and that's going to allow a single detached dwelling to be built. So if approved by council, the amending bylaw will identify a development envelope with 10 meters front yard and 10-meter side yard setbacks. Those are the setbacks that are required by the township zoning bylaw and recommended by the Grace Harbor Conservation Authority. So there's no change proposed for the for the environmental protection zone on the property. So just in terms of the planning report, a policy review was provided in that report for your consideration of this application. And again, I'd be happy to answer any questions members may have on the policies. But I will highlight that as the application seeks to permit development within an identified envelope, because of development constraints associated with the natural hazard and heritage features on this property. So those features are identified in the policy review section of the report through comprehensive review comments provided by the Grace Harbor Conservation Authority. So prior to this application being submitted, the applicant did consult with the Grace Harbor Conservation Authority, and the features on the property were evaluated to a degree which resulted in the recommendation to permit development within an envelope. So if the property owner wants to develop outside of that envelope, then they're going to have to be reevaluated. The application would be reevaluated, and it may require an EIS. So further, the Conservation Authority is recommending that an engineered grading and drainage plan be completed to demonstrate how the development is going to be contained within that proposed development envelope, and to detail existing and proposed grades and finished floor elevations of the future dwelling. So in order to be able to actually implement this requirement, I'm recommending that should council support the application, that they consider implementing a holding provision on the amending bylaw with a requirement to provide a engineered grading and drainage plan and finished floor elevations as noted by the Conservation Authority. We can't ask for that right now because the applicant's only in a position where they're asking for the land to be rezoned so that they can build. There is no design plans for the house. They're not going to seek those out until they actually get permission to be able to build. So the option would be to either put a holding provision on that zoning. So when they are ready to develop and they have the plans and they have everything, the engineering ready, they can come forward and apply to council to show you what they've done and how they're meeting the requirements of that bylaw. Or we could go the route of having a site plan agreement registered on title to the lands. The site plan agreement, that process is more expensive for the application. It's far cheaper to remove a holding provision. And with the site-specific bylaw, we can delineate the development envelope in the bylaw. So there's less paperwork, so to speak, for the property owner when they are ready to build the house if council supports the rezoning. So the other thing that I would note is that county comments came back through the circulation process, and they're noting that on Schedule B to their official plan, this property is within 300 meters of a mineral resource extraction area. And so for anyone familiar with the area, that's the MacDonnell property directly across the street. It's licensed as a pit, an extraction pit. So specifically at section 5.6.26 of the official plan, it identifies that at the time of a zoning amendment application, the owners are required to demonstrate that that new dwelling or the development is not going to prevent or hinder the expansion or continued use of the aggregate operation or be incompatible for reasons of public health, public safety, or environmental impact. So as that demonstration that hasn't been provided through the application process this far, it can't be concluded that the application is consistent with the county official plan policy. So the next step in the process then would be for the property owner. I will be connecting with the property owner and the County of Grey just to determine the sort of demonstration that they need to evaluate the impact of a dwelling on that operation. The application was circulated to various agencies for review. The Conservation Authority has identified a development envelope in which to contain the development associated with the single-family residence on private service. The envelope factors in setbacks under the anticipated rural zone and the existing EP provisions in the township zoning bylaw. An engineered grading and drainage plan is recommended to be completed as the site plan for the site-specific proposed development proposal. The Conservation Authority wishes to be notified of any decision on this application. Grey County Planning and Development Department note that provided positive comments are received from the Conservation Authority regarding the significant woodlands, valley lands, and adjacent lands, they have no concerns. They note that the property is adjacent to an active mineral resource extraction area identified on Schedule B to the official plan. And although development is proposed and occurring on a pre-existing lot, the county planning staff want to ensure that the development will not hinder the future expansion or continued use of the pit. So the applicant shall demonstrate and or provide justification that the proposed development will not negatively impact the adjacent pit. The county requests notice of any decision rendered with respect to these applications. And as I mentioned, I will work with the county and the applicant to clarify the required submission. The Historic Saugeen Métis have no objection or opposition to the proposed amendment as presented. So the application was circulated to property owners within 120 meters, and we didn't receive any comments from the neighbors. And just in conclusion, because the county isn't satisfied that the application is consistent with their official plan regarding mineral resource extraction areas, we can't conclude that the application is consistent with applicable policy. So I'm just recommending at this time that the report be received for information, and I'm available to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Jane. No members of the public registered with the clerk to provide comments in support of or opposition to the applicant. The applicant, Mr. Cliff McMillan, registered to be present this evening. Mr. McMillan, is there any comments from you? Are you there, Cliff?
Mr. McMillan, you are muted. To unmute yourself, please select *6. Mr. Mayor, if you'd like to move forward with questions of council.
Okay, does council have any questions on the applicant? Deputy Mayor Carlton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Jen. Just curious, how difficult is this going to be for them to get that county zoning changed? Because I had noticed that there are already other properties closer to that pit than this property or building is going to be proposed. So I'm just wondering how difficult that whole process is going to be.
So the official plan policy just asks for a demonstration that the use isn't going to negatively impact the operation of the pit. So there is actually 3 pits along that stretch of road. There's just one that's within that 300 meters. So what we can do is we can check the property file just to see what the extraction permissions are for that pit, and see how long it's been in operation.
We can hear you, Cliff. Just give us 1 minute. Jen, are you finished?
And then assist the applicant with that, with taking that information to the county.
Thank you.
Hey, Jen, I'll go to Cliff. If you're on the phone now, we can hear you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Cliff. Any comments?
Not really. We just do the proper thing. And can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Cliff.
Well, I have really no comments on it. I just want to do what we have to do with the pits, whatever we have to do there. We're willing to do that and carry on. Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. And Mr. Mayor, you are muted.
Yes, that's better. I don't know why I keep muting myself. Probably better, but anyway, thanks for your comments, Cliff. Does council have any other questions on the applicant? Seeing none? Council will consider all matters placed before it prior to submitting their comments to the applicant. May I have adjournment of this public meeting, please? Moved by Councilor Sullivan, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. A show of hands, all in favor? Is carried. I have a recommendation here. County comments indicate a requirement to demonstrate and/or provide justification that the proposed development will not negatively impact the operation of the adjacent pit. It cannot be demonstrated that the proposed applicant is consistent with the County of Gray official plan policies regarding mineral resource extraction areas. It is recommended that PL 2020-10 Public Meeting Report Z0221 for Morris be received for information. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councilor Pringle, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Carol Barfoot is absent. Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn?
For.
Councillor Ryan Thompson?
For.
Councillor Paul Sutherland?
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle?
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton?
For.
And Mayor Dwight Burley? And Mr. Mayor, that was a 4?
Yes, it was 4.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, is this the time we would like to go into closed session?
Yes, it is.
And Madam Clerk, are we going to deal with both items we have in camera or just the one?
We are going to deal with both items as added to the agenda.
Okay. The Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs moves into closed session at 6:32.
5:32.
Sorry. I'm trying to learn to tell time. 5:32 with the Township CEO, Clerk, and Treasurer present to discuss A, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administration tribunal affecting the municipality or local boards, and B, personal matters regarding the identifiable individual. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Coburn, second by Councillor Sullivan. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Okay, when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn?
For.
Councillor Ryan Thompson?
For.
Councillor Paul Sutherland?
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle?
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton? Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton is absent. And Mayor Dwight Burley?
4.
Thank you, and that carries. So if I could ask that all members please move to the virtual closed session meeting site.
no delegations. The consent agenda. Does any member of council wish to pull an item on the consent agenda? Deputy Mayor Carlton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to pull 9.3.1, the Town of Blue Mountains letter about tax rolls, and 9.3.2 from Orangeville about greenhouse gas and renewable energy.
Thank you. Councillor Colburn.
Yeah, sorry, mine was the same as Deputy Mayor Carlton, 9.3.1, Town of Blue Mountains.
Okay. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to note for procedural reasons in the motion that as we added closed session as agenda item 7, the items will be reflected as 10.3.1 and 10.3.2.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So I have a recommendation here that Council Plus adopt consent agenda for information as circulated less 10.3.2. Someone to move, put on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councillor Colburn. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Carol Barfoot is absent. Councillor Kathy Moore Coburn.
For.
Councillor Ryan Thompson.
For.
Councillor Paul Sutherland.
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
Or
And Mayor Dwight Burley.
4.
Thank you, and that carries.
Okay. Moving on to our agenda, we'll go to items that were pulled for further discussion. Deputy Mayor Carlton, your first was 10.3.1 about Blue Mountains. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I note that this item is also on our county council agenda for tomorrow. And I think this is an item that our treasurer and I have talked about before, where Town of Blue Mountains has concerns about all of us missing tax revenue based on properties not being properly kind of moved along. In their case, building permits were issued, the houses went up, but the property continued to be taxed as just a residential lot. So just to ensure that we are still ensuring that ours are all looked after through impact and not falling through the cracks such as happened over there.
Thank you. Councillor Colburn, any comments on this motion or this item? Go ahead.
No, it was the same thing. I was just looking for some clarification from our Director of Finance.
Okay, Cassie, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I believe it was about 2 years ago, the Town of Blue Mountains hired a consultant to do an analysis of their tax roll. So what they were concerned about was that things weren't being accurately captured in the roll. And it wasn't just about, residential builds, but it was also making sure that things were classed properly. So, if someone had a home business, they wanted to ensure that a portion of their property was being taxed at commercials. So they hired a consultant to do that project, and they actually found quite a large number of missed assessment. And I don't want to quote that number because it's from memory from 2 years ago, so I'm not going to say what that number was. So the Township of Georgia in a little bit different of a situation. So basically, the Blue Mountains had development, and they had development happening fast. So it was much harder for them to track that development and ensure that it was getting captured. Township staff here annually, what my department does is we review all building permits issued in the year and do an analysis to ensure that MPAC is capturing that on the roll. So what we do is each year we look at the 3 years prior. So we just did it for 2020. We looked at building permits issued in 2020, 2019, and 2018, and ensured that a supplemental had been issued for them. Anything in 2018 and 2019 that we didn't see as supplemental, we follow up with MPAC. 2020, you could reasonably make the argument that, it's still in progress, because it quite accurately could be. If a building permit was issued in the summer, the house might not be completed yet. I know that we talked about this at the treasurer meeting, and a lot of the treasurers said, why don't we do this at the county level? Because then you're capturing everything on the roll, as opposed to each municipality taking this on. But yeah, something to consider. I don't know that it would have as great of an impact on us as it did the town of Blue Mountains because of their speedy development, but definitely something council could consider.
Thank you, Cassie. Any other comments? So I do not believe we need a notice of motion. It's just for discussion. Okay. No other further discussion. I'll move on to our next item that was pulled was 10.3.2, and Deputy Mayor Carlton, I believe you pulled it.
Yes, I did, Mr. Mayor. Again, this is one, it's from the town of Orangeville. And what I was really looking at there was, is this something to forward on to our Climate Action Committee for discussion at that level? Maybe to determine from there whether we should be supporting this or not. So it's more a question of staff, I guess. Is that the appropriate procedure to do with that one?
Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, council has every opportunity to refer items to a committee level for their consideration. So if council would like to move to do so, we will refer this item for consideration of the Climate Action Committee.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We just give staff direction to do that, or do we need a motion?
A simple show of hands in favor of referral will suffice.
Okay, all those in favor? It is carried, Madam Clerk. So that's all items that were pulled from our consent agenda. I'll move on to the agenda then. We know correspondence. We're down to committee reports. I have a motion here that the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting held on February 17th, 2021 be adopted, including recommendations COW 2021-06 to COW 2021-14. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councilor Sullivan, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. Can anyone hear me? Yeah, okay. So I believe we have it moved and second on the floor. Madam Clerk, were we going to pull one of these items?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before we commence those discussions, I would open the floor to council members. Does anyone wish to pull any of the recommendations as included in the minutes for further discussion?
Go ahead, Councilor Sullivan.
Thank you. Through you, your chair, I would like to pull the motion in regards towards the Cole Side Road closure. I can't find the bylaw number now.
Item 2021-09. Madam Clerk. So a show of hands if council supports pulling this motion. All in favor? So it is pulled, Madam Clerk. And do we bring it back at a future meeting, Madam Clerk, after further discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, Councillor Sutherland has the opportunity now to ask his questions.
Go ahead, Councillor Sullivan.
I guess I'm looking to see if council would be willing to discuss this at a further meeting and look at all our options and defer until we can make a better informed decision.
Deputy Mayor or Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And further to Councillor Sutherland's comments, as a result of closed session discussions this evening, staff are recommending that the motion be amended to defer approval of recommendation COW 2021-009, pending further staff investigation and information to council.
Okay. Madam Clerk, I guess my internet must be cutting in and out. I believe I understand that you were disclosing because of our discussion in camera.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Do we need Councillor Colbert?
So thank you. I'm a little confused as to the intent around deferring this motion because I feel like I'm hearing something different at this point. So is the intent to bring it back to further debate that motion? I'm hearing Councillor Sutherland say it's to get more information and possibly consider other options, and that is different than what I thought I had agreed to in closed session. So I'm asking for some clarification.
Madam Clerk, we got to be careful not disclose anything that was discussed in camera.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what staff are recommending is a simple deferral of this recommendation. It will appear on a future council agenda, pending further discussions among staff. At that time, if there's additional information to be appended to this motion, we will include so upon consideration of the deferred item.
Okay, this sounds pretty clear. So we need a show of hands, Madam Clerk, to allow this to happen.
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, we need a mover for the amendment and a seconder, please.
Okay, someone to move the amendment, please. Moved by Councillor Pringles, seconded by Mayor Carlton. If there's no other discussion on the amendment, Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please, or can we do a show of hands?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So through you, I'm going to read the motion as it is amended. So the motion now reads that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on February 17th, 2020 be adopted, including recommendations COW 2021-006 to COW 2021-008 and COW 2021-010 to COW 2021-019, and that recommendation COW 2021-009 be deferred pending additional information. Is there any further discussion on the motion as I have read prior to my taking the vote?
Madam Clerk.
Okay, and just for
Go ahead.
clarity, what we're establishing here is we are deferring motion COW 2021-009, deferring it to a future council agenda.
Thank you.
So when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as amended. Councillor Carol Barfoot is absent. Councillor Kathleen Moore-Coburn.
Opposed?
Councillor Ryan Thompson.
For.
Councillor Paul Sutherland.
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
For.
And Mayor Dwight Burley.
Or,
Thank you, and that carries.
thank you. Madam Clerk, I believe we are down to 13.2 on our agenda now.
That is correct.
Thank you. I have a recommendation here, whereas the Inter-Township Fire Department Joint Board of Management received and approved the 2021 draft budget at their meeting on February 9th, 2021, and whereas the Joint Board recommended by Resolution ITFD 2021-04 that both respective councils approve of the 2021 budget as presented. Now therefore, Council of George and Bluffs hereby approves the 2021 budget for the Inter-Township Fire Department Joint Board of Management as presented. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councilor Sullivan, second by Councilor Thompson. Is there any discussion on the motion? Oh. I'm going to let the treasurer speak to this. Cassie, I assume you're still here?
Yes, I am, but I believe Councillor Colburn had a question first. Maybe she should ask it before I start talking.
I see she's shaking her hand no, but maybe Councilor Colburn, do you have a question?
Sure, I was just going to say our treasurer should go ahead and provide information first, but I'll throw it out there, and I imagine Kathy's going to cover it anyway. So if I'm not mistaken, we're being asked to pass this draft budget here tonight. I guess I'm looking for more information as to why we're looking at a 29% increase in the budget, and if I can get some clarification around that, it would be helpful. I've written some notes down now. I need to read it. Some of the charges that I have written down have doubled. So one of them is that seems to represent a huge increase is under communications. So I'm wondering if that one can be explained. And the other one is administrative charges. So that's gone from 12,000 to 24,000. I'm wondering why the budget sees a need to double that amount as well. Thank you.
Kathy, go ahead.
Thank you for the questions, Councillor Colburn. So I will address your questions first, and then actually change plans. So sorry. First of all, I will talk about the budget in general. So we are seeing a large increase over 2020, and the driving factors are two things. The first being the number of calls that the fire department attended in 2020, as well as the amount of capital works. So in 2019, the ITFD responded to 253 calls. In 2020, they responded to 310. So an increase of 57 calls is quite a significant expense to the fire department, because number of calls directly influences the cost of volunteer firefighters, as well as other things such as fuel, wear and tear on the trucks, etc. So part of the increase in the budget is because of the increased fire calls leading to increased costs. The other reason for the significant increase is capital. So in 2020, minimal amounts of capital projects were budgeted for because we were in ownership negotiations with the municipality of Meaford. So in 2020, we budgeted to spend $28,000 on capital, and in 2021, we are looking to spend $114,000. So that is quite a significant increase. And it is because of, in 2020, we had everything valued. We were talking about ownership. So we weren't looking to invest a lot of in capital, but in 2021, we need to. The fire hall needs a new roof, and that comes at a cost of $30,000. We have ongoing bunker gear replacement. Bunker gear expires for our firefighters, and we replace about $20,000 of bunker gear each year. But another thing is we want to buy SCBA masks for our firefighters to protect them from COVID. It's a reusable mask, and it will keep our firefighters safe when responding to calls. And we want to invest $20,000 to put HVAC in the fire hall. Currently, they use baseboard heaters, and there's no air conditioning except for a window unit in one of the offices. So we're looking to do, some upgrades to maintain that asset, to maintain that building. Specifically, Councillor Colburn, you asked about two things, so communications and administration charge. So the communications is comprised of two things. The first being dispatch services, which we have a contract with the City of Owen Sound Police Services to provide dispatch services to ITFD. That cost significantly increased in 2020, and in 2021, the cost remains the same as 2020. So we used to spend about $38,000 on that dispatch cost. In 2020, we spent $47,000. The other part of that is the Grey County radio project that is taking place. So I believe it was a year ago now, Anne Marie Shaw, who was our interim CIO at the time, brought a report to council detailing the radio project. So I am not a technology expert, but I will do my best to explain what that is. But basically, they're trying to make the radios consistent throughout the county so that they can communicate with each other. So if Chatsworth firefighters are on the same scene as the ITFD firefighters, the radios will work to communicate with everybody. That project comes at a cost of $16,000 this year to ITFD, and there's an annual cost each year for the next 8 years. The county did put forth some funds to kind of offset those costs, and I believe they used their modernization funding for that. But all the townships agreed to be part of that project, and this is our share. As for the administration charge doubling, that is the fee that the ITFD pays Georgian Bluffs to provide administration. So Georgian Bluffs provides a lot of administrative support to ITFD, including payroll, accounts payable, human resources, accounts receivable, and now the fire chief and deputy fire chief actually report to our CIO. So a $12,000 charge, as has been recorded in the past at least 5 years, does not cover the costs that the township is incurring in providing those services. So it was increased this year to better reflect the services that the township provides to that fire department. In my 6 years here, you know, kind of the breadth of what we're providing has expanded. So it used to be just strictly payroll and AP and AR. We added HR, we added them reporting to the CIO, and that fee was never increased to reflect those changes. So it is being increased this year for that. So I hope I've answered your questions, but if anybody else has any other questions, please let me know.
Councillor Colburn, you have another follow-up question?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Cassandra. Thank you. That does answer a lot of the questions, and that totally makes sense. One thing I have discussed in the past, and I'm just going to ask it again now, is in regards to how our firefighters get called out to the various calls. Of course, when there's a fire-related incident, we want all hands on deck. That goes without saying. However, I've seen multiple instances of many of our firefighters getting called out from all areas, geographic areas, where there might be an individual who needs medical assistance. And so we have our firefighters being paid a base amount to be there when really they may just be helping someone who's had a dizzy spell, for example, into an ambulance. So I've asked with these new communication systems and dispatch systems and radio projects, why is it that we can't hone our dispatch technology or process such that when we have these types of calls, we don't end up with 9 or 10 firefighters standing around doing probably very little in terms of the medical calls. I know other fire departments dispatch them out on a regional basis. So you don't have everyone from our entire district heading out to a call in one of the farthest corners of our municipality where they may not be needed. So I guess my question, long-winded, and I apologize, is why have we not been able to pare that down to a safe and efficient but reasonable number being called out to those medical calls?
Cassie, you want to try to answer that?
I'm not going to answer that because, to be honest, you know, an explanation of how those calls are dispatched is best for the fire chief. But what I was going to comment is there's ongoing discussions that need to take place. And one of them is, you know, levels of service and the management structure of that board. So I was just wondering if this is something we should add to that list under levels of service to better, you know, define or what we want those little levels of service to be.
Good comments. It's the chief is not with us here tonight, but I'm quite sure that one of the reasons Councilor Colburn is that he has to make sure. Oh, Madam Clerk,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The fire chief is actually with us this evening. Acting Chief Gautreau, do you have any comments? Chief Gautreau, you are muted.
Yeah, no, my apologies. I'm just sitting in and just starting another meeting as well. With regards to Kathy's question with regards to streamlining medical calls or something like that, the way the system works now is 911. If you were to call 911 right now, your call would go through CAC, which is the ambulance dispatch. And when they realize, well, it's a medical call, us as a fire department, we do have a tiered response agreement with EMS. And what they do is they check all the boxes. And if this criteria, so we get called to an unconscious, it's dispatched through CAC. So then CAC would call the fire department, which in turn pages us. So our fire department is set up. It's no different than any other fire department. If you were in Meaford, you would page Meaford Fire and they would get 26 guys responding if they're available. The way our system's set up through the day, it's open. It's an open page to all 40 members, and it to streamline that, it would be communications wise. I don't think we could do it with the system we have due to the fact of manpower. We have at this onset of COVID, we tried divvying up the townships to respond to the medical calls to streamline it. And we got, we had one medical call where we only had one guy show up due to that township because of the availability of our guys. So through the day, we're not guaranteed to get firefighters. Through the day, we're only guaranteed to get 2, which is Andy and myself. The rest are all volunteers. So when the page goes, they, the guys drop everything they're doing to respond, but some guys cannot respond due to locations and of work and not being able to get out of work. But the way our system works now, if I got a firefighter that's from Sarawak responding into, he's going through Sydenham and the page comes in for a medical call in Sydenham, he responds directly to those calls due to the fact that they have the proper PPE and he has all the basic gear to start that evolution. So to say, can we streamline it and only get 4 or 5? You're never guaranteed to get 4 or 5. That's why it's an open page. Our average could be from 9 to 14 guys through the day. Some days we get 4, some days we get 5. So there's no guarantee through the day that you can streamline it. At night, it is different at night. At night, we just use individual townships. So we have a medical in whatever township is, we just page that township. So so if I page Sarawak, I'm only getting Sarawak firefighters. Keppel, only Keppel, and Derby, only Derby. So that streamlines it down to about 10 at night. I'm hoping that maybe answers your question. I know that everybody says, well, some of the calls we get, may seem trivial, but with the information that's given to our dispatch services, could be a lot worse. So we receive calls. We have received calls where somebody's VSA. We get there and they're conscious and they're sitting up. But with the information given to dispatch, it could be a lot worse initially. And when we get there, it's not as bad, or it could be not bad when we get called. And when we get there, it could be VSA. So every incident is different. To streamline it, it won't work because of the way the volunteer system operates. I know at Chatsworth, they have 26 guys show up and all 26 will respond as well.
Al, go ahead.
If I may, through Mr. Mayor, to all of council, this is something that we can certainly put in our 2021 work plan, take a deeper dive in terms of the call out process, and we can certainly provide additional information to council and base some recommendations on how we can move forward to attempt to preserve life and do what we need from a health and safety perspective and fire suppression perspective, but also address some efficiencies that hopefully we can gain. So we can certainly put that on our 2021 work plan and bring that back to council.
Thanks, Hal. Thanks for doing that. Cassie, any other comments on the budget motion before us? I believe you were done or not?
I'm finished, thank you.
Okay. Does council have any other questions on the motion before us? Madam Clerk, I do not see any hands, so would you take the vote, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn,
For.
Councillor Ryan Thompson,
For.
Councillor Paul Sutherland,
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle,
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton,
Or,
and Mayor Dwight Burley.
Or,
Thank you. Councillor Carol Barfoot is absent, and that carries.
thank you. Madam Clerk, I want to point out to you all, council, my internet keeps cutting in and out, so bear with me. Just so be aware of it. Moving off our agenda, we have no staff reports, no public question period. Madam Clerk, was there any questions come in from the public?
There was not.
Thank you. We're down to bylaws, other bylaws. The bylaw 2021-09 in a bylaw to delegate certain powers and duties under the Municipal Act SO 2001-25, the Planning Act RSO 1990 P13 and other acts be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor, clerk, and sealed with the seal of the corporation endorsed in the bylaw book. Someone to move the motion before us, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councilor Sullivan. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Okay, when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn,
For.
Councillor Ryan Thompson,
For.
Councillor Paul Sutherland,
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle,
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton,
or,
and Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Councillor Barfoot is absent, and that carries.
Thank you. Moving on to our agenda, our next recommendation is that bylaw 2021-10 being a bylaw to adopt electronic signature policy, admin 2021-01 be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed and sealed the corporation and endorsed in the bylaw book. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Colburn. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Okay, when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn,
For.
Councillor Ryan Thompson,
For.
Councillor Paul Sutherland,
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle,
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton,
or,
and Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barfoot is absent, and that carries.
Thank you. Moving on to our next bylaw, I have a recommendation here that bylaw 2021-11 being a bylaw to amend Schedule A of bylaw 2018-86, council remuneration policy be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk and seals the seal of the corporation endorsed in bylaw book. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councilor Sullivan, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Councilor Colburn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to make sure I'm on the same page here, we're talking about bylaw 2021-11. Okay, so
Yes, we are.
I did have a couple of questions or comments, perhaps. So I was just noting that there's a section about special events that I wonder if we could have clarified for us, Mr. Mayor. It says for any other special events not covered by resolution of council, the mayor and deputy mayor may attend and receive a per diem payment. I would like to hear what is defined as a special event, and does this is the intent of this statement that those can be attended and submitted for payment without council approval, and is it unlimited? That's my first question, and I may have another one later.
Councilor Coburn, were you addressing that question to me, or would you like staff to answer that?
It doesn't matter, just whoever has the knowledge to clarify for me where this is coming from and what special events are defined as.
I can give you an example, but Madam Clerk, you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will take a first shot at this question. I will defer to our treasurer following my statements. So in your current remuneration policy that is appended to this bylaw, special events are defined as the following. So special events shall mean events at which members represent the township, such as fundraisers, social events, charity events, grand openings, or other economic development related events and Remembrance Day celebrations. So as has been practiced in the past, whenever a council member would like to attend a special event and would like to then be paid for their attendance, that has to be approved by a resolution of council. Madam Treasurer, do you have any follow-up comments?
Cassie?
You are correct for members of council. So the statement about the mayor and deputy mayor is that they can attend without a resolution, and there is not a set limit on these events, as per your question, Councillor Coburn.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Further to, how do I put this delicately? Are we looking at a lot of money being spent in this regard in previous years? I just want to make sure we're being accountable to the ratepayers. I'm not so sure that we need to be paid every time we attend a fundraiser or even a Remembrance Day ceremony. And I'm not exactly sure how I feel about the mayor and deputy mayor having special authority to go ahead and attend these special events that they're getting paid to attend, while the rest of council needs to have resolution in order to attend those. So I would just say that I'm feeling a little uncomfortable about that, but I'm interested to hear what other councillors may have to say about this.
Madam Treasurer, you want to speak to the comments first?
So thank you, Councillor Coburn. I'm actually currently working on our council remuneration disclosure for 2020. As you guys are aware, that's a requirement under the Municipal Act to be disclosed prior to March 30th. So what I can do as part of that disclosure is highlight the number of those special events. Our CIO has asked me to include the number of meetings each councillor attends, which hasn't been included in the past. So I can also add a column for special events should council like that information.
Thank you.
Councillor
I think for the sake of transparency and accountability, I think it would be wise to include that. Thank you, Cassie.
Councillor Coburn, did you get all your questions answered?
I think so, Mr. Mayor. I think there were more comments, more so perhaps than questions. And if I'm the only one that has thoughts about that, then I guess we'll move on.
No, that's fine. Good comments. I do not have all council on the screen, Madam Clerk, but I can't see any. I see you put your hand up. Go ahead. Madam
Thank you,
Clerk.
Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to remind council that as we are moving into an election season, we will be reevaluating this council remuneration policy, and we will look at it in its entirety, including special events and how current members are remunerated for their attendance at said events. So just a reminder.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Seeing no other comments or questions from council, Madam Clerk, will you take the vote, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will take the vote. I just wanted to note that for clarity, the minutes will include direction to include wording or rates of attendance for special events throughout 2020 in that report that the treasurer is bringing to council.
Okay.
So when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn.
For.
Councillor Ryan Thompson.
For.
Councillor Paul Sutherland.
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
For.
And Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Councillor Carol Barfoot is absent, and that carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Moving on for agenda, we're down to unfinished business now. I have a recommendation here. A very long one, so please bear with me. Whereas council received a resolution passed by the council of the municipality of Grey Highlands regarding the increased municipal insurance rates at their meeting on February 10th, 2021, and whereas council of town of George Bluffs recognizes the impact of increased insurance rates on local governments and their consistence, and whereas Association of Municipalities of Ontario outlined 7 recommendations to address insurance rates issues. 1, the provincial government adopts a model of full prorated liability to replace joint and several liability. 2, implement exchanges to the existing limitation period, including the continued applicable of the existing 10-day rule on slip and fall cases given recent justification interruptions, and whereas a 1-year limitation period may be beneficial. 3, implement a cap for economic loss awards. 4, increase the catastrophic impairment default benefit limit to $2 million and increase the third-party liability coverage to $2 million in government-regulated automobile insurance plans. Access and implement additional measures which would support lower premiums or alternatives to the provisions of insurance services by other, such as nonprofit insurance reciprocals. 6, compel the insurance industry to supply all necessary financial evidence, including premiums, claims, deductible limits, changes which support its own admissible arguments. Now, therefore, the Council of Township of George Bluffs supports the municipality of Grey Highlands and in their request to the province to review the recommendations as outlined by the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and the copies of this resolution be forwarded to the parties contained in that of the municipality of Grey. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Colburn, second by Councillor Thomas. Is there any discussion on this motion? Madam Clerk, I cannot see everybody, so I do not know. I see no hands coming up.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. There are no hands raised.
Thank you. I'm glad I don't have to read it again. Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Okay, when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn.
For.
Councillor Ryan Thompson.
For.
Councillor Paul Sutherland.
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton,
Four.
Mayor Dwight Burley,
4. Madam
Counselor
Clerk, you
Carol
fall off your
Barford.
chair.
Counselor Carol Barfoot is absent, and that carries. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our agenda, excuse me. Our next recommendation, whereas council received a resolution passed by the council of City of Port Colborne in support of that of the town of Denford, Blenheim regarding unlicensed and non-monitored cannabis grow operations at their meeting on February 10th, 2021. And whereas council recognizes the impact unlicensed, unmonitored cannabis grow operations have had on local government and their constituents. Now therefore, the Township of Georgian Bluffs hereby supports the resolution as passed by the City of Port Colborne and the Township of Denford and Blenheim, and that copies of this motion be forwarded to the parties contained in that of the Township of Denford and Blenheim. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councilor Pringle. Second by Councilor Sullivan. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Okay, when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Counselor Kathleen Moore Coburn,
Four.
Counselor Ryan Thompson,
4. Excuse me,
Triple
4.
Seven,
4.
Counselor Graham Pringle,
4.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton,
Four.
and Mayor Dwight Burley.
4.
Counselor Carol Barfoot is absent, and that carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on. A notice of motion. I have a recommendation here, whereas council received a resolution passed by the council of the Township of Augusta regarding the closure of Ontario Fire College and their meeting on February 10th, 2021, and that whereas the Ontario Fire College is one of the prime sources of certified training for Ontario firefighters, and whereas the Inter-Township Fire Department has benefited from the training provided by the college, now therefore council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs hereby opposes the closure of the Ontario Fire College and further joins the Township of Augusta in their request that the province of Ontario revise their decision to close the Ontario Fire College, and the copies of this motion be forwarded to the parties contained in that of the Township of Augusta. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councilor Colburn, second by Councilor Thompson. Acting Fire Chief Cotreau, do you want to comment on this? Madam Clerk, is the Fire Chief still here?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It does appear that the chief was called away from this meeting. So between the CAO and myself, we can kind of give you a brief overview of the memo report that has been appended to your agenda this evening. So as included in that report, you'll notice that by news release, the province announced the closure of the Ontario Fire College in January. They're proposing to towards a more regionalized model that will be administered by the by the Office of the Fire Marshal. This program will involve both a hybrid training system that will involve on-site training as well as virtual training. You'll notice, as included in the report, that the Ontario Fire College has been closed since the beginning of the pandemic. So it is the proposal that it does not reopen for services. While the financial impact of the closure is relatively unknown right now, it is expected that this may have additional costs to the municipality and to the Inter-Township Fire Department, given the rate that the Ontario Fire College courses were provided at, being $65 approximately per course. It is expected that that may be, that the courses offered through this regional program may be more expensive than that. So there may be an impact to the Inter-Township Fire Department budget on an annual basis. That's kind of a brief, just high-level overview. Mr. CAO, do you have anything to add?
Al?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the clerk summarized it nicely. I will say that in all likelihood, you're going to see some private sector companies jumping into the sector in terms of offering up services. What we do know for sure is that the costs will not go down as a result of this initiative from the province. The costs will go up. And it's part of what we're going to be working with in this year with the fire chief in regards to getting a better handle on training requirements, how often our volunteer firefighters actually have to go out and get trained. Are there opportunities for a train the trainer type of thing? And then we do some of the in-house training ourselves. So we're looking at all those options coming up, and we will bring some further information to council for consideration. But rest assured, what I suspect is over time, costs will be going up to provide our firefighters with adequate training. And whether we'll have access to grant opportunities from the province is unsure at this time, but costs will likely be going up.
Thank you, Al. Any comments from council? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Okay, when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn,
For.
Councillor Ryan Thompson,
For.
Councillor Paul Sutherland,
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle,
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton,
For.
and Mayor Dwight Burley.
Or,
Councillor Barfoot is absent, and that carries. Thank you.
thank you. Moving on to our agenda, we're down to our next notice of motion. I have a recommendation here. Whereas council passed resolution RES 2023-40 after a meeting of November 25th, 2020, opposing the proposed amendments to the Conservation Authority Act 1990 by Bill 229, Protect, Support, and Recover from COVID-19 Act, Budget Measures 2020, and whereas Bill 229, Protect, Support, and Recover from COVID-19 Act, Budget Measures 2020, including Schedule 6 of said act, received royal assent on December 6, 2020, and whereas Schedule 6 of Bill 229, Protect, Support, Recover from COVID-19 Act, Budget Measures 2020, amends the Conservation Authority Act 1990 to sufficiently hinder the Conservation Authority role in regulating development, permit, appeal process, and engaging in review and appeal of planning applications, and further as Schedule 6 provides that the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing may by zoning order under Section 47 of the Planning Act 1990 permit all or part of a development project in a Conservation Authority area of jurisdiction, and whereas the Township of Joros Bluffs values and relies upon the natural habitats and water resources within our jurisdictions for the health and well-being of our residents, and values the conservation authority work to prevent and manage the impacts of flooding and other natural hazards. Now therefore, Council of the Township of Joros Bluffs reestablishes opposition to the amendments to the Conservation Authority Act 1990 by Bill 229, Protect, Support, Recover from COVID-19 Act, Budget Measures 2020, and further employs the province of Ontario to repeal Schedule 6 of Bill 229 and maintain an impact role of conservation authorities throughout the province, and the copies of this resolution be forwarded to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, MP Alec Ruff, MPP Bill Walker, Grace Hubble Conservation Authority, and all other municipalities. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councillor Thompson. Any discussion on the motion before us? Al, did I see your hand up? No. Is there any discussion on the motion? Counselor Sullivan?
I was just curious that, this was brought forward at a meeting that I was, not there for, and I have yet to look at that meeting, minutes, but, so was this brought forward by the Grace Harbor Conservation Authorities?
Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Councillor Sutherland. This was a notice of motion brought forward at the February 10th council meeting in response to correspondence included on that agenda that requested that council oppose the specifically Schedule 6 in Bill 229 and specifically the ability for the minister to provide zoning orders.
Okay, Counselor Sullivan? Is there any other questions or comments from council? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, if you take the vote, please.
Okay, when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn?
For.
Councillor Ryan Thompson?
For.
Councillor Paul Sutherland?
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle?
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton?
For.
Mayor Dwight Burley?
For.
Councillor Carol Barfoot is absent, and that carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to our agenda, we're down to new business. Acknowledgement statement. I believe Councillor Coburn, you wanted to speak to this. Go ahead, Kathy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm asking council tonight to support a recommendation to adopt a land acknowledgement policy. These policies have been established now for several years since the Truth and Reconciliation report was finalized some years ago. I think it's important to recognize the land that the First Nations people have occupied and own, and I think out of respect, I believe that having a land acknowledgement policy will demonstrate our recognition and respect for our Indigenous population. So like Grey County has, and I believe the City of Owen Sound has, I'm asking council to consider that recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. Madam Clerk, I believe you would probably bring a report back to council at a future meeting. Oh, I see Deputy Mayor Carlton, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would support this and actually forwarded to our CAO and clerk this past week an acknowledgement that I came across that really says it very well, I thought, and that maybe gives a starting point. My suggestion would be that the clerk bring back a report on this exact item with suggestions for how we would handle that.
Thank you. Mr. CEO, any comments?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, concur with the comments made to date. Staff will return with a report with some recommendations. We'll look at best practices, and I believe we'll have something that council will wholeheartedly support very shortly.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Councillor Coburn, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to add, I think it would be appropriate to reach out to the Indigenous people in our area to get their input, of course, on that kind of a statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. A good suggestion. So, Madam Clerk, we look forward to your report coming back.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we could just have a show of hands in support of the direction to the clerk to bring back our staff report.
All in favor? I believe it's carried.
Councillor Sutherland? Thank you.
Okay, moving on our agenda, we're down to notice of motion. Does any member wish to provide a notice of motion for consideration at future meeting of council? Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know you're thinking probably and uttering underneath your breath that I've had a lot to say this evening, so thank you for your patience. I had two notices of motion. The first one is regarding an effective hiring practice policy that includes anti-nepotism. And I have spoken to our CAO about this. I understand it's part of the work plan, but I just wanted to formally state that I would be supporting a policy that includes that kind of language to protect the best interests of our municipality going forward. I know that we all have a duty to declare pecuniary interests, and that's fine. That's what the Municipal Act requires us to do. I personally don't think it goes far enough. And if we learned anything from the Collingwood judicial inquiry, we should be on board with declaring more conflicts of interest than just pecuniary, including in our hiring practices. So that having said that, I understand that that work is underway. The second notice of motion I would like to bring forward is the policy around the creation of a nuisance bylaw regarding odor and lighting associated with marijuana grow operations in our residential areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Coburn. I believe you would speak with the clerk to make sure that your notice of motions are coming forward the way you wish. Okay. Is there any other notice of motions? Seeing none, Councillor Coburn, your input in our council meetings is well founded, and please continue on doing it. I guess we are down to, we've done the closed session. We're down to our confirming bylaw. Bylaw 2021-12 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council on February 24th, 2021 be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed to seal the corporation, and endorsed in the bylaw book. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councilor Sullivan, second by Councilor Pringle. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Madam Clerk, will you take the vote, please?
Okay, when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Kathy Moore Coburn.
For.
Councillor Ryan Thompson.
For.
Councillor Paul Sutherland.
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
Or.
Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Councillor Carol Barfoot is absent, and that carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I ask for a motion to adjourn, our next meeting was March the 3rd, but I believe, Madam Clerk, with conversations, we are probably going to cancel that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, tentatively right now, we are proposing to cancel the March 3rd, 2021 council meeting due to a lack of content. However, that has not yet been confirmed. I will notify all of council and staff and the public of any cancellations as they become necessary. That will likely happen either tomorrow or Friday.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. If that does happen, our next meeting is March 10th at 5 o'clock. Council has tentatively scheduled a 2021 budget discussion on March 30th, 2021 at 1 p.m. All are welcome to join virtually upon registering with the clerk, so please do that. We would love to hear from you. If there's no other business here tonight, I need a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilor Sullivan, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. Show of hands, all in favor of adjournment. I believe everyone, yes, the motion is carried. We're now adjourned. Thank you, everybody.